praise to him who reigns above, in majesty supreme, who gave his Son for man to die, that he might man redeem. Blessed be the name, blessed be the name, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name, blessed be the name, blessed be the name of the Lord.
Good morning. Hi, Ted. We'll continue our study in the Revelation. We'll go over the chapters again. What's that saying? Oh my. Repetition is the mother of learning. Chapter 1, Introduction, Jesus in the midst of his churches. Chapters 2 and 3, an examination of and letters to the 7 churches of Asia Minor. In chapters 4 and 5, God is on his throne. He controls the universe, not Caesar. Chapter 5, Jesus, the Lamb Lion, is worthy to loose the seals, revealing the future, because the future belongs to him. Chapter 6, the Lord looses the seals. We see a conflict between the Roman Empire and the Church of Jesus Christ. In the first 4 seals, the horsemen, revealing the battle, a bloody battle, a battle in which the church is beaten to a pulp. Chapter 5, seal 5 rather, martyred saints are under the altar in heaven crying to God. When is he going to take vengeance on those who murdered them? Chapter 6, because the time isn't right yet, the Lord gives them a demonstration of what will ultimately happen. In chapter 7, we take a pause from bad news to hear some good news. The saints, a number which no man can number, are seen in heaven. So regardless of how we leave this world, it's a step upward. It's never downward. Things only get better. The best is yet to come. Chapter 8, verse 1, the 7th seal is open, revealing 7 trumpets. The 7 trumpets are divine chastisements against the empire. Each time a trumpet blows, 1/3 of the environment is affected. God is punishing Rome, repent or perish. Throughout the 8th and 9th chapters, we read about these particular chastisement on the empire and her friends, which are 10 kingdoms that will be revealed to us later. Chapter 10, we see a mighty angel with a little book. Little book contains the remainder of the contents of the book of Revelation. It's a bittersweet book, John said. It's sweet because there is good news. Ultimately, the church triumphs with her Lord. Ultimately, the saints have a home in heaven, but it's still bitter news because a lot of bad things are yet to happen, and a lot of people are going to lose their souls. In chapter 11, the 2 witnesses representing the church is killed by the empire, lays 3.5 days in the street. The world rejoices because they think the Church of Christ is dead. She's not, but they think she is. And at the last moment, as God often does, at the last moment, the climactic moment of an event, God steps in, he resurrects the saints, and he revives his kingdom. And she grows in phenomenal proportions. Chapter 12, we start over. We're going to be introduced to who the characters are in this drama. The woman represents Israel before the birth of Christ, the Church of Christ after his birth. The male child is the Son of God, and the dragon, of course, is the devil. Chapter 13, the dragon enlists 2 beasts to help him. The devil does. He can't touch us directly like God doesn't touch us, but he works through people just like God does. In this case, he works through the civil authorities, and he works through false religion, specifically pagan religion, most specifically Caesar worship. Chapter 14, there's a pause. Once again, time to refresh, because the conflict is hot and fierce, and many, many saints are going to be martyred. Chapter 15, we see 7 angels line up. They're given 7 bowls, and the contents of those bowls are the fury of God, or the wrath of God. A great smoke appears before the temple of God. No one can enter the temple. In other words, the time has come to destroy the empire, and no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody prays, Jehovah's not changing his mind. He is going to release those bowls of fury. And we see that happen in chapter 16. Ultimately, the Battle of Armageddon is fought, which brings us to the end of the drama. At the Battle of Armageddon, the Roman Empire is dead. The Church of Christ lives. And for all practical purposes, the historical narrative of the book of Revelation is over right there. It doesn't go any farther than the termination of the Roman Empire, which occurred in the year 476 AD. So the historical narrative of the Revelation stops at 476 AD, which means none of that has anything to do with us living today. Except John will go out to the day of judgment, beginning in chapter 20 and verse 11. He'll go out to the day of judgment, and he'll explain some of the things that will happen at that time. But the narrative part is over, and that's where so many people make a terrible mistake. They're trying to make the book of Revelation apply to us today. Well, what's the value of the book of Revelation for us today? The value is this. The way God worked in and among his people, the things we learn are the same now as they were then. All the principles are true because they're rooted in the very nature of God. We see how God deals with nations that persecute his people. We see how God deals with false religion, why he allows them to exist, why he allows them to flourish. But the bottom line is, he is going to ultimately destroy them. That's the same thing that Jesus said, every plant which my heavenly Father has not planted shall be rooted up. That's exactly what he was talking about. It's the same thing. So even though the book of Revelation deals with a roughly 500-year time frame, the principles that we glean out of the book are principles that are still true today. God is still working in the nations today just like he did then. Nothing's changed. He's very much alive and well. Well, when we get to chapter 17, we're going to zoom in and identify who the characters are that's involved in the drama. We got a very brief glimpse in chapters 12 and 13, very brief, but now the Lord is going to zoom in so we'll know without a shadow of a doubt who the beast is, who the harlot is, and all that. There's no doubt about it. It's the Roman Empire. He talks about the most hateful city on earth, which was Rome. He talks about the city that ruled the world, which was Rome, the city that sits on 7 hills, which is Rome. There's no mistaking the fact that this is Rome under consideration. And God wants us to know that. So we have a descriptive in chapter 17. It's very clear, I think to the unbiased mind at least, that the subject under consideration is the great mighty Roman Empire, probably the greatest empire that ever existed. We in chapter 17 we get details of the prostitute and the beast. Chapter 18, which is where we are today, he'll give us some details of the fall of Babylon. Chapter 19, details of when the empire falls and the church and the Lamb are victorious. There will be rejoicing in heaven. There'll be the marriage supper of the Lamb, and we'll discover that the prostitute and the beast were both cast into the lake of fire. Okay, when? That's back in 476 AD. Okay, they're gone. The story's over. Chapter 20, verses 1 through 10, we get the details of the 1,000-year reign of the saints. A lot of people call it the 1,000-year reign of Christ. It's the 1,000-year reign of the saints. When you read the text and you read it properly, Christ always reigns. So what John is talking about is that the saints reigned for 1,000 years with Christ. So the subject in this book is the 1,000-year reign of the saints, and Satan is bound for 1,000 years. Well, when does the 1,000-year reign begin? When the empire falls, 476 AD. Okay? In other words, we're living during the period of the 1,000-year reign. But 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years have gone by. We're in a book of symbols and numerology. What does the number 1,000 stand for? Totality, completeness. What does the number 1,000 mean? It means until the end of time. From the time of the fall of the empire until time is no more. That's the 1,000-year period that's under consideration, and I'll show you that in just a few moments. We'll also see the end of the 1,000 years. There will be one final battle, if you can call it a battle. It's more like a hiccup. Satan makes one last ditch attempt when he's loosed, and then he's immediately cast into the lake of fire. Now I want to go over this a little bit because I want you to understand the timeline of this thing, because it's very, very important. We know in chapter 16 that the Battle of Armageddon is fought. The empire falls, the drama ends. There's really no doubt about that part. It's fairly simple. Well, we have I've been emphasizing these dates. Now this date is very important. The Gentiles trample the church of Christ for 42 months, chapter 11 and verse 2. Two witnesses prophesy 1,260 days, chapter 11, verse 3, which, if you calculate, is the equivalent of 42 months. The church is protected for 1,260 days in chapter 12, verse 6. The woman is nourished for a time times half a time, chapter 12, 14, time 1 times 2, half a time. 1 plus 2 is 3, 3.5. Which is the equivalent of the 42 months or the 1,260 days, because there's also the 3.5 day period that we read about. Rome exercised power for 42 months, 13:5. Okay, what we've got, what we're being shown is that the events under consideration are going to take place in a definitive period of time. In other words, there's a beginning point and there's an ending point. And all the events that we're discussing is going to occur in that time frame. What is it? It's 42 months. Literally, no. It's a definitive period, and that's what the numbers mean. It's going to start, it's going to stop. It's not indefinite. Rome isn't going to rule forever. Her days are numbered. The drama begins back in chapter 12 with Christ. Okay? Actually, it starts a little bit before Christ, because we have the woman, which represents Israel, and then Christ is born and he's caught up into heaven. So the drama that's under consideration in the Revelation begins basically with Jesus Christ, maybe a little bit sooner. Personally, I think a little bit sooner, maybe 56 years sooner to be specific, but it ends with the demise of the Roman Empire in chapter 16. Okay? There's the beginning point, there's the ending point of the historical data. That's all there is to the Revelation. It's that simple. It's just a story of what happens in this great conflict. The Roman Empire became the world's superpower in the year BC 60, not too long before Christ was born, and she's recorded historically as no longer existing in the year 476 AD. Are these dates definitive? Well, no. I mean, you could take some here, take some there. But roughly, this is the period of the Roman Empire. The drama, the 42 months, the 1,260 days, the time times half a time, the 42 months, it's all the same period. It's this period of time. It began roughly with the birth of Christ. It ended with the demise of the Roman Empire. That's what those numbers are signifying, a definitive period of time. Okay? So the prophecy of the Revelation, with the exception of the last day, the prophecy of the Revelation has been fulfilled more than 1,500 years ago. And it's not being fulfilled today. We can look at it. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I'm going to push the button and find out. Okay, the Battle of Armageddon was fought in chapter 16 and verse 16. Well, what does that mean? It means the Battle of Armageddon was fought roughly around the end of the Roman Empire, 476. That's some 1,500 years ago. People today are looking out to the coming of the Battle of Armageddon. The Battle of Armageddon is behind us 1,500 years. It's not something that lies in the future. It's something that lies in the past. It's long over with. The beast and the false prophet. The beast was the emperor, or Rome personified in her emperor. The false prophet represented false religion, which has to do mostly with Caesar worship, that Caesar is the god of the world. The beast, the false prophet, they're thrown into the lake of fire during this time frame, probably at the time of the Battle of Armageddon, I would assume. Number 3, Satan is bound for 1,000 years. Now we'll read that in chapter 20, the first 10 verses. But here's my point. For him to be bound for 1,000 years is something that has to take place after the demise of the empire and not before, because it's dealing with a different time frame. Satan will be loosed at the end of the 1,000 years. The day of judgment will take place. That's discussed Revelation chapter 20 verse 11 and through the 22nd chapter. It deals with the day of judgment. So Satan is loosed at the end of the 1,000 years, but that has to do with the day of judgment. It has nothing to do with you or I today. Satan was bound. Satan is bound now. He wasn't bound during the time of the Roman Empire. Okay? In other words, he wielded more power. He wielded more authority. If you take a person, take me for example. Right now, I move around, I do whatever I choose to do at will. Of course, everything's subject to the will of God. Now, if you were to take me and tie me up with a rope, I'm bound. Well, that doesn't mean I've ceased to exist. That doesn't mean I don't function anymore. My mouth's still working. I can still talk. Okay? I can still move my feet, but I am limited by being bound. Okay? What we're going to discover is that during the time of the early years of the church, during the time of the Roman Empire, Satan wielded more authority in the world than he does today. Okay? With the end of this drama, he is bound. He's restricted. He can't move like he did. And he will remain this way until time ends. That's what the binding of Satan is all about. It doesn't mean that Satan is cast into the lake of fire. It just means he's somewhat immobile. The things that people come up with this premillennialism stuff, I hate it that it's that way because most of the people believe it, but it is so wrong. If they would just look at this, you can go back to the book of Daniel chapter 7 and 8, and read about these events of the Roman Empire. Daniel recorded them a long time ago, what was going to happen during the time of the fourth kingdom. And then in the book of Revelation, we see it elaborated on a little bit more, but it had nothing to do with us living today. The 1,000-year period, as I mentioned, would begin with the end of the drama, the end of the empire, the Battle of Armageddon that was fought. The 1,000-year would begin and continue until the day of judgment, just like that. During the 1,000 years, as I said, Satan is bound. On the day of judgment, Satan will be loosed. Okay? He'll be loosed. There's a battle described in the book. My guess is it's probably a battle that amounts to nothing more than it did when Satan tried to battle heaven in chapter 12. It's over before it begins. He is then cast into the lake of fire. You'll notice that Satan's not cast into the lake of fire until the day of the judgment, whereas, it's gone now, but the emperor and the false prophet, they were cast into the lake of fire. That is eternal condemnation. But not the dragon. He's not cast into the lake of fire until the judgment. Well, how could people be cast into the lake of fire before the judgment? It's not people under consideration. When we talk about the false prophet, we're talking about a religion that advocated the idea that Caesar is God. What was thrown into the lake of fire? That concept, that philosophy, that religion. Well, what about the beast? Who was thrown into the lake of fire? It wasn't a person. It was the throne that the emperor sat on. In other words, the Roman Empire was thrown into the lake of fire, never to be resurrected again. It's over, final, finished, once and for all. But not the dragon. He's bound. He shall be seen again in the drama on the day of judgment. He can work now, but not to the same degree when he, let's say, moved about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Since that time, he's been bound, limited. He can still have a great influence, but not like he did at that time. It was a different time, a different situation. And we notice he won't be loosed until judgment. So there's not going to, you know what they call it, the Antichrist. The Antichrist is coming back. No, there's no Antichrist coming. Anti means opposed to. Any person opposed to Jesus Christ is an Antichrist. There is no the Antichrist. There's always been Antichrist, and there always will be Antichrist till the end of time. But as far as the Antichrist coming and establishing a world government and all that stuff, it's not going to happen. Why? Because Satan's been bound. It's not going to happen again. He did it once through the emperor of Rome. He's not going to do it again because he's now bound and shall forever be bound, at least until the day of the judgment. What about got me out of breath? Do you want to say anything over that? We'll do it again. I wanted you to understand that before we get into it, because as we cross the details, I want those things to come to your mind. So when we read the actual verses, you can reflect on what we've just discussed. In chapter 18, after the identification of the beast and the false prophet in chapter 17, after these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority. The earth was illuminated with his glory. He's a ranking angel. He's illuminated. He brought light to the world. He cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is a term used to describe those cities that were much like Babylon. You had Babylon, you had Athens for a time, you had Jerusalem, you had Rome in the end. So he says Babylon, he's talking about Rome, the Roman Empire more specifically. Rome the great is fallen, and all has become a dwelling place of demons, just a ghost town. A prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Whenever it's used in the scriptures, the word fornication, especially in an apocalypse, it's usually applying to idolatry or spiritual adultery. In other words, people who do not worship the living God, that of course through Jesus the Christ, is considered an idolater by Jehovah God. When Christian people become unfaithful to Christ, they're spiritual adulterers. They're cheating on their husband. The church is the bride. Of course, Christ is the groom. So when I'm unfaithful to my Lord, I'm a spiritual adulterer, just like I would be a literal adulterer if I was unfaithful to BR. Okay? And those who do not worship God at all, they are classified as an idolater. The term fornication is the word that's used because it covers whether married to Christ or not married to Christ. If it just had to do with those who are married to Christ, the word adultery would be used. But the Lord didn't use the word adultery. He used the word fornication because it includes both. Fornication literally means sexual impropriety. Adultery is when a man cheats on his wife with a woman. Well, what happens if he cheats on his wife with his dog? Or what happens if he cheats on his wife with another man? Well, you can't call it sexual adultery. What do you call it? You call it fornication. Okay? There's a difference between fornication and adultery. All fornication isn't adultery, but all adultery is fornication. Okay? So when the word fornication appears, it's usually applying to both uses of the term. All the nations have drunk of the wine of her wrath. They bow down to Caesar. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. The merchants of the earth, they committed fornication. Why? Because they came rich through the abundance of her luxury. She had the wealth. She had the power. And they would bow down before Caesar, those nations would, in order to get money. That's what they were after. That was their goal, not Rome, money. I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people." God is talking to his people. Don't be a partaker in the sins of the nations, lest you also share in her sins, lest you receive the of her plagues. Just back there a second ago, remember I said fornication, spiritual adultery, Christians unfaithful to God? Well, God is speaking to them. Come out, stop, repent, come back, lest you share in her sins. For her sins have reached to heaven. God has remembered her sins, her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you. Repay her the empire double according to her works. In the cup which she has mixed, you mix double for her. She mixed up a cup of fornication, and one of the cups of fornication is her slaughter of the saints. She went after the saints. Thousands and thousands and thousands of Christians were murdered by the order of Rome, and now we're being told that she's going to receive double. She gave a cup. She's getting back 2 cups. Actually, she's getting back 7 cups. In the measure that she glorified herself, Rome lived luxuriously. This is the mentality of the nation. They were rich. They were powerful. They were a wealthy nation. They thought they were better than they actually were. They lived on couches of luxury. In the measure that she glorified herself, in that same measure, God give her torment, cause her to sorrow, for she says in her heart, this is the attitude of the people, I sit as queen and am no widow, and will see no sorrow. How many Americans feel that way? Think about it. We're indestructible. We're the superpower. That's her sin right there. They thought they were better than they were. And they looked down on the rest of the world. And because of that, her plagues will come in one day. Death, mourning, famine. She will be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judges her. I don't think God ever came down on a nation like he came down on Rome. I think that was the hardest lick the earth ever felt, was with the Roman Empire. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her, well, what about them? Well, they'll weep. Yeah, but they didn't have Caesar that was called God. No, but they were bowing to the Caesar of another nation who was called God. Therefore, they're going to weep. They're going to lament for Rome when they see the smoke of her burning. They're going to stand off at a distance. It's kind of like the prodigal son. When he went off with pockets full of money, he probably had a lot of friends at the beer joints and everything. They come up, slap him on the back, good old boy and all that. Well, he got money in his pockets, and he buys them free beer or whatever they want. But what happens when the pockets run out? They're all gone. Well, that's what happens in the drama. These 10 nations, oh boy, they just kiss all over Rome until God brings out his stick of chastisement. What happens? Now you see them off at a distance. They're not going to be close anymore. They're afraid they're going to get hurt in the fray. They stand at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city Rome, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. I'm going to go through this fast because it's only a descriptive. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over Rome. I'll insert Rome so we keep the train. For no one buys Rome's merchandise anymore. Merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble. Nobody's buying anymore. There's no money to buy with. The nation's been hit by the bowls of the wrath of God, and nobody's trading. Cinnamon, incense, fragrant oil, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, and bodies and souls of men do not exist like they did. The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you. Their wealth, their luxurious living. You talk about a depression. This is a depression of epic proportions. And all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you. Now they were paupers. You shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things who became rich by Rome, well, they're going to stand at a distance for fear of her torment. They don't want to get burned. Weeping and wailing. Oh, I'm so sad. Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls is gone, and they're weeping and wailing because they can't make any money. For in 1 hour, such great riches come to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what is like this great city? What do we got in chapter 18? We got Rome. We're told something about her destruction and how it's going to affect the rest of the world. She was the superpower. When the superpower goes down, everybody goes down. There's no doubt about it. You're talking about a world recession. Because there's always an economy that keeps the world moving. Well, the economy's destroyed. And every other economy is destroyed right along with her. Because there's nobody to foot the bills anymore. So the world is mourning over the death of Rome. They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing and saying, alas, that great city, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. Okay, the whole world's in mourning except on the other side of the coin. Rejoice over her, O heaven. Rejoice over the demise of Rome. All you angels of heaven, rejoice. Look down there on the earth. Rejoice. Look what God has done to the people who persecuted his saints. This is what the angels were longing for. Rejoice over her, O heaven. You holy apostles, all you prophets, look, God has avenged you on her just like he prophesied. Daniel probably stood up and danced because God fulfilled his prophecies. A mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone. He threw it into the sea, saying, thus with violence the great city Rome shall be thrown down, shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, trumpeters shall not be heard in you anymore. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you anymore. And the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you anymore. You got a depression, a worldwide depression. The light of a lamp shall not shine. The voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard anymore forever, because she's never going to exist again. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived, believing that Caesar was God. The reason Rome was thrown down, in her, this is it, was found the blood of prophets and saints, and of all who were slain on the earth. This takes us all the way back to chapter 6 under the fifth seal. Remember, under the fifth seal, the saints are seen up in heaven under the altar of God. They've been murdered for their testimony of Jesus Christ. And they cried out to God, 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 when are you going to take vengeance on those who murdered us? And he told them to wait a little while. He gave them a snapshot of what would come. Well, this is it. And he wants us to understand why he did it. They hurt his people, and he came after them with a bigger stick. That's what it boils down to. She killed his people, and therefore God took vengeance. Chapter 19. What time do we stop? Right now? Chapter 19 is kind of long, I think. I don't think I can get through it. I better stop. I don't want to get in the middle of it because it'll be a long time before I get back. I know for most people, when you look at it, it's a little challenging to understand. I've been studying this book for so many years. To me, I can see the picture very clear. I'm not going to say without a shadow of a doubt that what I believe is true. It may not be, but I'm 99% confident. I'm really very confident, but could be wrong. Okay, this is the way I understand the book of Revelation. That it was written for a definitive period of time, a time in which you and I don't live, and the only thing that's really applicable to us, literally, would be the day of the judgment. But the rest of it ended. Yeah, Bill?
The History Channel really plays up the Antichrist.
Yeah.
They show this handsome man with a big car, he's the Antichrist.
They make so much money off that. Yeah, you would not. I'm talking about trillions of dollars. There are trillions of dollars involved in premillennialism. I'm serious as a heart attack. They've been doing this from back in the 1970s. Al Lindsay. I don't know how much money that rascal made off writing several different books he wrote. They've turned them into movies, the Armageddon, the Day of Armageddon, and all that stuff. They've made so much money off something that's not even true. But many people are looking for all these things to come to pass. They talk about the signs of the times, you know. Well, we're seeing the signs of the times. The end must be near. I hear that every week. A lot of people know I'm a preacher, and it's not uncommon at all when I get around somebody, they'll say, you know, like during a hurricane hits or something like that, don't you think those are the signs of the time? I mean, people are so inundated with this mentality. And even many of our own brethren, they talk about the signs of the times as revealed in the Bible. Listen, the Bible doesn't reveal any signs of the times. He can't be a king on the earth. Christ, I can't remember. Does anybody remember what chapter that's in? What book and chapter? Christ can't be a king again. Well, he can't be a king on the earth. I think it was Jeconiah. When Jeconiah failed, God made him a promise that none of his descendants would ever sit on a throne again in Jerusalem. Well, Jesus is a descendant of Jeconiah, which means he can't sit on a throne. This whole notion has become a multi-million-dollar industry, but the sad part is numbers and scores of people are going to lose their souls because they bought into all this stuff. In Matthew chapter 24 and verse 36, when Jesus talked about the last day, he said, of that day and that hour no man knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. It was a day that was meant to be unknown. There are no signs given. There are no signs of the times. The only kind of a sign we might see is a sign that God is angry and that someone is being chastised or punished. But it has nothing to do with the end time. But a lot of people have fallen into that trap. They make good movies. Hey, I've seen them, boy. Before I understood all this stuff, you know, about millennialism and all that, I've seen a couple of those movies back 20, 30 years ago, and they're pretty good movies. I liked them. got my wheels to spinning. Only problem is when you read the Bible, it doesn't fit. It doesn't work. I'm going to go get a drink. I'm going to stop.